says we're streaming now, Lydia.
Oh, good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Radnor Township School District Curriculum Committee meeting for October 20th, 2020. We have a jam-packed agenda again, so we're going to get right into it. I'm going to throw it over to Mr. Bechtold for introductions and administrative remarks.
We have none this evening due to the robust agenda. We're going to jump right into it.
Okay, perfect. I think that brings us up to public comment. Is Mr. Petiti or is anyone else privy to knowledge about public comment?
Yep, there are no public comment as of now.
All right, great. That moves us right into the approval of the curriculum committee meeting minutes for September 22nd, 2020. Does anyone on the committee or anyone else have any comments about the meeting minutes? Okay, we're moving fast. So that brings us already to agenda item 4.1, which is diversity, inclusion, and equity. I got that wrong. Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
All right, thank you. So we have Dr. Stevenson here tonight, and he is going to provide us a DEI update. Dr. Stevenson, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Director Bechtold, and thank you, Curriculum Committee, for this opportunity to give a brief update of where we are since the initial conversations began this summer, where the board robustly and united around saying that the district wanted to enhance and to grow our diversity, equity, and inclusion model. In the summer, starting with conversations, as you know, the district led by Superintendent Batchelor shared some of the things that we've done from up to the past till now, and then outline some of the things that we want to continue doing through the guidance and approval of the board, and then in the leadership of Superintendent Batchelor. So what I'll do tonight is talk about where we are from that point, and where we are now, and then I'll outline some next steps. And so number one, starting off with under the leadership of the school board had a training from the school board association, Dr. Heather Bennett, who is the leader of the diversity and equity for that association. Superintendent Batchelor thought it was important that we maintain a sense of consistency. Therefore, in August, we invited Dr. Bennett back, and she provided an equity outline as a part of the professional development for all administrators, where administrators were given a detailed agenda about how we can move forward with this work. And then to connect all the dots of the stakeholders are there, as we had our re-entry for administration and for teaching and staff. We provided that same professional development for a day of DEI work for both our secondary, elementary, and other staff that were available, where Dr. Bennett also did another equity training. From that equity work, from there, we established building level DEI committees for staff and faculty. At each level, each building has their own DEI equity, their DEI teams. And each of these teams are to talk about curriculum and program at the building level. And in some cases, for instance, with elementary, we will talk about how we cross-pollinate some of those ideas because of across the levels. The goal of that is to have teachers and to have members of the staff be able to talk about things that they see that they need to be addressed in each of those buildings. Some of these things are common themes that are threads across the board that we will work as a district, but some are individual. But the guidance of that is to give them a sense of having those conversations. So they begin. The second is that we established we began the conversations about the parent advisory piece, which connects with Pillar 2, which is to increase cultural awareness for all teachers, administrators, and staff. I'm sorry, I just talked about that piece. I'm talking Pillar 3, which is the increase community engagement and parental involvement in discussions about this process. I'm pleased to say that we began with the goal to having a PTO / community DEI advisory group, which we hope that would have a few people that would sign up, and we would have one at elementary level, middle school, and high school. I am happy to say that we had over 100 people who inquired about joining, and we had about 60 who filled out the interest survey. That says a lot about a couple of things. Number one, it says that the folks in this community, because they came from a very diverse backgrounds and interests, are interested in this work as well. And number two, that that we have given this opportunity here at the district for this different forums. So what we plan to do is, instead of just having just the advisory group of a small group, is to use those folks who are interested and to expand the opportunities for conversation, meaning that we will expand it and look at subgroups of where people can be interested in different areas that they're either with their expertise or their interest about areas across this. Because as you know, diversity, equity, inclusion has a wide umbrella. And so we want to give people the opportunity. So we will be working to convene those first meetings next month. Also, with the work with communication department, we began to finalize a DEI website that will be going live very shortly. And under this whole umbrella, now that we're going to have also with the student piece, the middle school and the high school, now that we have students back in, that we will have students, and at the secondary, both middle school and the high school, we'll start having those DEI type of groups working a part of. I wanted to say something about Pillar 3. Pillar 3 about the community engagement piece. We, on behalf of the district, we can't thank folks enough. Over the summer, Superintendent Batchelor and I have had numerous conversations with people in the community, different individuals and groups. There were student groups and who reached out, and we reached out to them. And there were other groups that formed things. For instance, we have a group called Radnor Rise, which is a group of parents who were concerned and had a lot of interest in who are constantly giving constant feedback. So as a district, we should be proud that we have not only that internally the leadership of the board, but we also have ongoing leadership with the community. And we can't thank these groups like Radnor Rise enough for their contributions. Now, all of this umbrella, we have created a DEI leadership team, which will be made up of administrators across all realms at the top leadership team. And our goal is to then take all those recommendations from all the other stakeholders and make some final decisions and recommendations to Superintendent Batchelor about what kind of curriculum and programming that we should have, not only short-term, but long-term pieces. One of the questions that came out is about the timeline. And one of the reasons we want to make sure that the timeline is deliberate and we don't want to rush in anything. This is not the type of work we want to be able to say that, again, as I said in August, we don't want this to be a moment. We want to make sure that this is considered a movement, an ongoing piece. And so all of those things that we did in place were done after a lot of deliberation and thinking. So what are the next steps? Our next step is now to work with Mr. Bechtel and Mr. Dukevich to identify a DEI consultant who can help, who can assist us with ongoing professional development for our staff and administration for the remainder of the year. We want to look at review relevant DEI data to help us at the DEI Leadership Committee on possible curriculum programming. We want to, as I talked about the parent community advisory groups, we will start convening them in November. We'll be establishing and convening those student advisory committees. In the spring, we hope to be reviewing recommendations for curriculum and programming that we'll bring forward to Superintendent Batchelor and the board. And we hope that all of this will continue the things that, whether short-term or long-term, will be items that will enhance our goals to then, by the spring, be ready to talk about possible policies and other related items and ARs that would support the work that we're doing. So that is a brief update of this, and I'm open to any questions that I can answer at this time.
So first, I wanted to say for Amy and Sarah, this item came to the committee after we had our planning meeting last week, so it may not be in, I guess you guys get paper packets. There was nothing about this in your paper packet, but there is something on board docs that outlines exactly what Dr. Stevenson just said with regard to the next steps. And
Mr. Bechtold also emailed it to the entire committee, Lydia, about an hour or so ago, right, Mr. Bechtold? So
I think it came around 1 o'clock, but I didn't get a chance. I haven't had a chance to look at any of it. I've been working all day.
I know, Amy, but some of us are occupied during the day.
So I would like to say that is because that was a delay on my part. So I would apologize. That's not Mr. Bechtold. That was me. I was supposed to submit it early in the week, but I was delayed. So that's why it was delayed getting to you.
My purpose for saying that was simply that I wanted to reassure you that, reassure you, Dr. Stevenson, reassure you, Mrs. Solomon, and reassure anybody that actually we did have the benefit of seeing it. And I appreciate the fact that even if it was a little late, you got it to us. So that's all I wanted to mention. That in fact, I personally had a chance to look at it, and I appreciate having a little preview of what you were talking about tonight. So thank you.
Well, I don't want to get into of course, I'm not trying to blame anybody for anything. For me, this is one of the top priorities that we're doing this year. So I was delighted to see this, and I did have a chance to look at it as well. But just to make the point, I mean, I think everybody knows that to have things function, as smoothly as possible, it's helpful to the public as well as us to get things as soon as we can. And I know this is not a normal time. And aside from this and, keeping everybody healthy, those are the two things I want to do this year. So that's just me personally. Does anybody on the committee have anything they want to ask about this? Go ahead, Ms. Goldman.
Thank you again. Like Lydia, I think that this is crucially important work, and I appreciate getting this update on what you've been up to, Dr. Stevenson, because I know you've been busy with it, as have other administrators for some time. One of my questions is sort of the sequence of things. I know that you had in next steps review relevant DEI data, but I was wondering, and I'm not sure, Dr. Stevenson, I may have missed it in your recounting of the trainings that have occurred this past summer, if you mentioned that the board also had a multi-hour training. And actually, the Pennsylvania School Boards Association just held an equity summit last week for school board members that was very helpful and appreciated. But the sequence of things, the audit of what our needs are, the state of affairs for diversity, equity, and inclusion, from some of the things that I've learned, seems to be a really foundational first activity, so that we have both a starting point in terms of what is the status of the district. And from there, once we know, we can set expectations for all of the people who have kindly stepped up to be involved in this from both a staff and community perspective. So could you speak a little bit to the sequence of this and your feelings on doing a comprehensive audit of both data and stories of equity, diversity, and inclusion around Radnor?
So I think that, if you look at for the next step, when I say review relevant DI data, that would speak to the audit piece. Because what we have to do is, the first thing is look at, let me go back a step. When starting with our talking tours, as I call it, this summer, whether it's email or face-to-face or Zoom, with between myself and mostly, not exclusively to us, but between Superintendent Batchelor and myself, all of that information, I spoke to numerous people, I've gotten numerous emails, I met with numerous groups. All of that is stuff that I've taken down. I've put in a repository for around this, to understand how do we shape this. So it was important to understand those voices. And when you talk about groups like Radnor Rise, who have an Instagram that will always give me feedback on, well, here's what people have said, whether it's former students and all that. And so what we've done is we had to synthesize it a couple of ways. Number one, we looked at those things and said, here are things that are true that we need to address. And we did. But there were also things that we said were not true, and then we had to clarify them. And then the third one is the ones of misperceptions. And all of those things we had to take into account to say, then what it is to formulate is, how do we look at our next steps? And our next steps for us is, number one is, we have to understand what we don't know what we don't know a lot of times in a district. And so the professional development piece is real critical, because no matter what type of data that we collect or what kind of audit we do, if we don't know what we're looking at, it won't make a difference. So therefore, while we understand about the information about where kids, or if kids are saying that we don't feel connected, then those are short-term things that we can do. If that parents are saying that they don't feel that that they have social and political capital, where people are saying that they don't matter because they come from a different group, then those are short-term things we got to do. But the overall the goal here is, number one is to right the ship, in the sense of conversations that need to be right now. But the long-term part is, when we talk about data, is to unpeel things around academics. And some of those things, I must say, already done. So for instance, that not already done, but already in process. So for instance, at the high school has been looking at, for the last few years, about how do we close this gap where kids who are historically underserving groups are not in honors classes or accelerated classes before that. It's not an overnight thing. So they've been doing it. So one of the things that they're doing is looking about, what are some of the options to ensure that, number one, how do we end these classes that look the way they do and allow kids to be in other classes? But that doesn't just mean just flipping a switch and putting them in classes. That means that you have to put academic supports in place. That means that you have to have conversations with them and their parents about the importance about how to navigate and what it is. It means that working with counselors to understanding how that looks at the end, whether maybe they don't want to go to college, but what kind of other track we're going to put them in. So these are the kind of things, that is just one example of, when you talk about audits, I think it's important, in the sense of some of my brethren and sisterin who love to talk about it in the sense of numbers, but it's that humanistic piece that we're going to try to run with here in Radnor. And my goal is that the sequence, number one, is we need to educate our staff and our community around this. And that is why we want to have this ongoing professional development. And in tandem, while we were collecting the data, looking at it, and then the hope by this time in the spring, we will have and be able to look at where we see our gaps, and then be able to then, number one, do one tier of programming sense to say, here are books that we need to have, here's the type of program we need to have. And then on the second year phase to say, here are the next level types of bigger picture things that we have to say. Again, as I said in the beginning, don't think this is something that we rush. I think it's something that we have to deliberately deal with. I mean, some of these things that we're talking about have a historical piece going back 400 years. So we can do it for another 400 days to make sure that we get it right.
Thank you. I appreciate all that. And I want to, maybe I misheard, but I want to be clear. I'm not talking about just numbers when I say an audit. I'm talking about peeling back the layers of every aspect of our operation as a district to see exactly, how diversity, equity, and inclusion is a part of that or not. So that whatever happens, whatever the end goals are, we have left no stone unturned. And I think data comes not just from numbers, it's also the stories you're talking about. And, I could be wrong, but my sense from paying attention to this for quite some time is that approaching it that way might be helpful to make sure, A, we don't miss anything that we should be looking at, number one. And number two, I'm concerned that there are people who don't believe that diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that perhaps we're not being as effective at as we might. Radnor Township School District does a lot of things extremely well, and we may be doing things well here, but I am sure that there are some people who think we're not. And I think having the data and stories helps us present hopefully, some incentive for people who might not be as attuned to this important issue to pay more attention to it and be involved. So that's kind of where I was going with that. But
So can I just say something about that, and then I'll let you finish. We're on the same page on that. I will say that, I have been giving the latitude to have those conversations independently, and I've been given the latitude. That is why, when 100 people signed up that they want to be a part of it, nobody's going to be turned away. And the conversations when I had, I went over some of them with Mr. Bechtel, and these are people who come from different perspectives on how to look at this. And at no point are we want the diversity of the district to be at the table. Where you're right, everybody at every level, our district is a microcosm of society. But what we have to figure out, how can we coexist and having conversations and ensure that every child, every member of this community, whether they're a parent, whether there's a non-parent in the community, whether it's a member of our staff, feel that they're a part of this community and that they're valued and their voice is valued. Now, at the end of the day, there's some non-negotiables, and we all know what those non-negotiables are when we talk around this. But in the bigger theme of it, I want people to be able to come at the table, whether it becomes from whether political, their social, their cultural, their religious, their ethnic, whatever, feel that the district, number one, is listening, but number two, that the district values this whole concept of what we look at and what we mean around this in our academic, our social, our cultural realms. And so that's the commitment that I've been given. My bosses are on here, so they didn't cut me off on the Zoom. So I guess I didn't. If you see my internet go out, that means I'm saying something wrong. But I've been given this latitude to do this, and I speak to them all the time about it. And we have the commitment. And what I didn't say here, and I apologize, Superintendent Batchelor, that we talked about an administrative council where he said this is one of our goals. So this is not something where it's looking at as optional. But here's the last thing I'll say, because I feel like my Quakerism is going away, and I'm going back to my Pentecostal days and preaching. Is that number one is that this is hard work. This is not easy work, Ms. Goldman, and people are going to push back. But what you got to do is you got to just understand that, as long as people respect the process, we can get it done. And I'm confident that we will get it done because number one, the leadership of the board said that they want this. And I've been here 16 years, and this is the first time I've been excited about doing this. And I'm excited about it because the board, and if the reflection is also from the parents, 100 people. We can't get 100 people to do nothing around here. So, I'm going to stop because okay. I'm gonna get cut off.
I see your passion. I appreciate it. And I want to reassure you, none of us I think I can speak sufficiently for the board that says we're not in it for easy. We're in it for the big, heavy lift. We're in it for the long haul, and we want it done right because it's that important. So, I hope you hear that loud and clear, Dr. Stevenson. The two other quick things that I just want to put out there, and we can talk about this later because this is such an important subject. It probably is worth its own meeting, which leads me to one of my other questions that I don't need an answer for, but it's been in my head is, how do you see the role of the board in all of this? Because we're so passionate about it and feel that it's so critically important to our school district, number one. My second thing, which is almost an answer to that question, is anything in the end result of what you're looking for, or not the end, there is no end, but one of the outcomes of this would be board policy. Again, from being involved in this in our own work as school directors, we know that that's an outcome, and the beauty of board policy around this is the fact that it memorializes the work that's going to be done, and it's not dependent on a different board, a different administration. What you're feeling in terms of support right now can be memorialized if this eventually becomes board policy, which is takes, from what I understand from other districts, quite some time to do. So those are two things that, again, you don't have to answer because I don't want to take up much more time, but those are things that are in my head, and given the opportunity to talk tonight, I wanted to put them out there.
Well,
And originally, I was just going to jump in real quick. Just originally, Dr. Stevens was planning to come in, December to give us an update, and we moved it up just to give a status update of where we are, with this initiative, because it is so important. And I think that, when we talk about the board, I think the board and what we talk about in November and setting our goals, the most important thing the board can do is help set the goals for what we should be looking at and working toward as a district. And that's something that the board has been involved in and will continue. And I think the answer to those questions, are something that, as Dr. Stevenson, and the administrative team and all that are involved in this, because it's not just one person, it's many administrators that are working closely and supporting this initiative, can talk about in December with a little bit more details on where do we see some of the long range planning and timeline moving forward.
Okay, great. Thank you. I will yield my time, but appreciate very much the opportunity to give some feedback. And thank you again, Dr. Stevenson, and everybody else who is supporting this work. We're all excited about it and look forward to what the future holds for it.
And I just want to thank you, Superintendent Batchelor, for answering the first part of it. The second part of it is that we're working with Dr. Bennett. And one of the things that a part of this working with Dr. Bennett is she will be working with us that will lead up to that policy. She's done this work in the other districts. So we hope to have some of that same type of timeline work around leading up to policy.
I have a quick question following up on that. So one of your next steps is to identify the DEI consultant. Can I infer that you've already identified Dr. Bennett as that consultant, or will there be somebody else? And how will you pick that other person?
So Dr. Bennett is more working around helping us develop around professional development, in the sense of making sure that we are consistent leading up to policy work, but the ongoing training kind of things she doesn't do ongoing training for staff across the board, that kind of way. So we're looking for someone who can do professional development or assist us, because as Superintendent Batchelor said, it is our goal that administrators across the board will be leading this as a unit. So we don't want it to be this is a one-person team or a couple of people here, that we're all in this on it. And the goal is that whether it's some type of online in the age of Zoom, a lot of school districts have moved to do webinars, ongoing webinars, where people can do it at a part of their professional development at their own time. There's asynchronous work where they can do it as a part of their professional development. So we're looking at creative ways where we don't have to bring in somebody. We don't want somebody who can come in and speak for one day and want people to read a book. We want something that somebody can ongoing, but is someone who can help us be the leaders. We don't want someone where we say, okay, we paid this developer, and if you got any questions about this, email them. We want it to be someone who can work in tandem with. We have not identified anyone yet, but we will be doing that, and by December we'll hopefully be able to share that.
All right, thank you. Andrew, Sarah, go ahead, Sarah.
First, I'm really happy to hear that with everything else going on, that you, especially because I know you had to open a building and get students back in classrooms. I really appreciate that you still focused on this and have kept it front and center. I do think it's something, the need doesn't go away just because school has become a lot more challenging these days. So I really appreciate that. And I appreciate that we're getting an update earlier than originally planned. One suggestion I want to make, I think that professional development and ongoing development is really important, but I think that the Radnor Rise group is a testament to the fact that the community, or a large portion of it, would like to be involved in this too, and that it's helpful to provide community outlets and community engagement opportunities during the year as well, even if it's by the same consultant who's training our teachers. An analogy, my kid plays soccer, and the travel coach pulled all the parents at the beginning of the year and said, look, don't yell from the sidelines, don't coach from the sidelines, and don't say anything to your kid when they get off the field about how they should have played, because I'm running the show and I'm coaching them. You be the parent. And I think that we don't want, as parents and a community, to undermine the work teachers and administrators are doing in the building. If we understand, the mission and the direction we're going, we can all contribute and help with that. So it might be helpful, even just once a year, to kind of try and put it on the calendar to, engage community. And I don't think it's a once a year touch point, but I think that, as a reminder, especially for families that are just joining the district, or, families with younger children who are new, to understand that this is part of our mission.
So thank you. I like to operate like a chief of staff kind of behind the scenes, but I will say, like, for example, Radnor Rise, I meet with them like twice a month. And because they are a group of people who are passionate about it, and I want to hear them. And there's some suggestions that are great, some that, we have to work on. We agree to disagree sometimes, but we want parent voice. The same thing about when I said that we had 100 people who are interested, my goal is to figure out how do we use their energy in some kind of way. They may not be in this formulate of what we originally talked about in committee, but there are ways to do it. And one of the things that we have looking at is looking at how we can have ongoing webinars that we can do around this, and identify people locally who have expertise. So like some of the people who said they want to be a part of this have expertise around this kind of work. Then why can't we have monthly webinars where people, we may have 10, we may have 100 people attend, but it's ongoing stuff like that. So the answer is thank you for that. I apologize if I was not clear about that, but the parent piece is important, and we have been doing it. It's not as public in front, but trust me, if anyone who wants to talk about it, I have, and if they said they haven't heard from it, just tell them to reach out. I promise I'll talk to them.
All right, Andrew, anything?
Not much more, except that, first of all, again, thank you. It's already been said, but thank you for just getting this ball moving. Momentum is huge. It's very important. And to see that even in times like this, when we've got so many things going on, I heard the principals have nothing going on. I've heard you guys are just, kicking back. But no, I think that we need to step up and make this a permanent part of what we do. I think that's what we're looking to do. Not make this a fly-by-night thing, but really make this a permanent part of what we do as a district. There's a lot to say about this, but in the interest of time, I just want to say something. As a music lover, as a collector of records, I think of a music analogy, which is, a steady drumbeat. We want a steady drumbeat of support. It's just going to be like a metronome, and it's going to be steady and consistent support for this over time. It's not going to be a flash in the pan. It's going to be steady and consistent support, at least as long as I'm on the board, that's for sure. And I think I speak for all of us right now on the board.
Thank you. I just want to end by saying this, that this is not my wheelhouse. This is teamwork, folks across the board. I've just been given become the facilitator of this, but I want to be clear that across the board at all of these levels, I've been working with a great team of folks who have equally been working across the board. So thank you for your time, and I hope everyone enjoy the rest of their meeting.
I also want to just add that you actually hit the nail on the head, Dr. Stevenson, when you said, I'm paraphrasing you, but really the enthusiasm is coming from this board. And I haven't seen this kind of enthusiasm on the board for this. So I second your feelings, how this is really thrilling that we're in a new space and time. So we look forward to December and, hearing more on what's happening. So thank you.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, and I just want to thank, and anything to try to keep Dr. Stevenson on the meeting longer. I thought I'd go on a little bit, but in all seriousness, Anthony, thank you for everything. And I would disagree with you on one item. This is your wheelhouse, and it's your wheelhouse because it's about relationship. It's about what you have been doing as an adjunct professor for many years, working with not only educators, but working with communities. And so we are lucky to have you as a resource. But your point about this is a team and it's well beyond just you, I do appreciate, and that is thanks to your leadership and the rest of the team, even on this meeting, and other administrators that are on this meeting, that this is something that is a district goal administratively, staff, faculty, that everyone's embracing from the board on down. So thank you, and thank you for being with us tonight.
All right, everybody take care.
All right, I think we're ready to move to item 4.2, which are the board agenda action items. Do we have a handout on that? Mr. Bechtold, are you taking that, or are they?
Yes, I can go ahead and pull those up. So
Okay.
Give me a second. All right, so here are the board action items. And so we've got textbooks for sale, donation, or disposal. And then we also have a request for a teacher and student survey. And we have Ms. Andrulovich and Dr. Kearney, who are here to speak a little bit about an opportunity for students in Ms. Andrulovich's classes to participate with the Penn Graduate School of Education. So I will stop screen sharing for a second and turn it over to Dr. Kearney and Ms. Andrulovich.
All right, thank you very much. So as a bit of an introduction, over the summer, Ms. Andrulovich completed a course that was offered by the University of Pennsylvania and MIT that used Biograph simulations to help teach biology concepts. To continue the research, the University of Pennsylvania reached out to teachers who might be interested in being involved in a research study. And Amber is here with us tonight to talk a little bit about her experience with Biograph and her interest in the study. After we speak about this, what we're asking for is the board to bring the two student surveys, or pardon me, the committee to bring the two student surveys to the full board for approval per our school board policy. So Amber, if you don't mind, why don't you share with the committee a little bit about your experience?
Thank you. Thank you again for putting me on the agenda for tonight. So Biograph was introduced to me from a former colleague. I'm a chemistry and biology teacher at the high school, and I consider myself still a relatively new biology teacher. So I wanted a way to help teach my students biology. And one of the great things that I've gotten out of the course is not only have I introduced some of the modules that Biograph taught me into biology, but I've also brought it into my chemistry classes, which has been even better because I've also been able to collaborate with my chemistry teacher colleagues and my biology teacher colleagues, because one of the big things with Biograph is the process of claim evidence and reasoning, CER, which is big in AP biology. So some students will take AP biology concurrently with honors chemistry or after taking chemistry. So being able to bring that into biology and then also bringing it into chemistry has been one really great thing about the Biograph program. Biograph is aligned with NGSS, which is still aligned with the Pennsylvania standards. And it provides a simulation modeling online. And I know because we're in this hybrid situation, that is actually really great for my students because I can have them work in breakout groups through Zoom and things like that. So one of the things is that they talk about in Biograph is complex systems, and then the CER and argumentation, and then being able to talk about modeling. So it was just a new way for me to see how I could implement things in my own teaching. I have not used Biograph yet because the first unit that I'm using is going to be within our macromolecules chapter, which is the chapter after that I'm working on right now with my biology students. So the reason I took this course was to provide my students with a little bit more challenge and something different, because I feel like biology can sometimes just be straightforward, and this gives them a different way to look at it.
Thank you, Amber. So I don't know if the committee has any questions, but if everything looks good to you, we'd ask that you bring it forward, please.
Okay. Anyone on the committee have anything they want to add? Dr. Babson?
Sure. Sounds like an exciting project, interesting project. I've been involved in several projects like this in my own research work. And so since this is a public meeting, I think it's good to just sort of mention a few things to contextualize, which is that in arrangements like this, there's always a consent setup or framework. So parents consent, students consent. Even if a student's parent consents, the student can not agree to participate. So it's a totally voluntary participation. So I just wanted to say that just as a general statement about these kinds of partnerships between universities and school districts. And so, I just have general questions just in terms of the scope of the project, i.e., how long will this research be carried out? What is the expected sample size of the interviews? And then also just in terms of observations, what is the expected data collection target for classroom observations? Will these protocols be explained in detail to parents and students so that they know what they're getting into? I mean, those are just some kind of general questions. Would you happen to be able to enlighten us on any of that?
So they did, and I don't know if you've got a copy of this. I thought you might. They gave us a 1 and about quarter-page overview of the study itself, and it sounds like, based on the description they've given to us, from students looking to conduct 2 surveys: a pre-survey and then a post-survey. So presumably before they've gone through the units using Biograph, and then after those. They anticipate that the surveys combined would take about 20 to 30 minutes for students to complete. They also intend to do some classroom observations via Zoom. Of both the teacher, and then if students and parents are give their permission, maybe some interviews with students as well, based on their experiences using Biograph. As far as how much the materials itself would take, they say that there are 5 different quote unquote units that the Biograph would be used for, and each one of those takes 2 or 3 class periods to complete, for students to complete. when Amber and I spoke, she felt that they were, very well aligned with our curriculum
Okay.
and felt that they would enhance what she's doing with her students. So, that
Okay.
was the things that we wanted to make sure of before we, brought it to this level. And it seems like, we're satisfied that it would give our students a good educational experience in addition to any benefits it might provide to the researchers.
Sure. So I did see that document that you're talking about, but I didn't really get a sense of how long the project was going to last and the scope of it. So, like you said, I mean, in a situation like this, you're looking at a curriculum intervention as kind of like a treatment. So you're looking at pre-treatment and then post-treatment to see if you any kind of effect. So is this for this calendar year then?
It would take place. My understanding is that it would take place during this calendar year. I don't know exactly how long they intend to work with the class. Amber, I'm not sure if you have any more information, but I'll be happy to reach out, pardon me, to the researchers to find that out if we don't know for sure.
So from my understanding, from talking with Kate Miller, she's one of the people through that we're working through with Biograph. It would be over the course of this year as far as working with my students. But I am also going to take part in professional development over the course of next summer after completing this research with my classes. And then I believe that they ask if it's possible to potentially do it again next school year. But with these students right now, it would just be this school year and then in my own professional development over the summer.
Okay, thanks. Amber, can you maybe just talk a little bit more about how this curriculum might positively affect the students' experience? I know that our students are adjusting to a lot this year, and I just want to get your input on whether you think this will be disruptive or displace anything that you want to do.
Honestly, I think it's going to add to how I've taught biology. This is only the 4th year that I've taught biology, and I'm in my 8th year of teaching. So it's definitely going to add to it and provide another level of, because right now labs are limited just due to social distancing when we're in the classroom. So this just provides students with another way to visualize a concept. So for example, the first one that I'm going to do, like Dr. Kearney said, there are 5 units. The first unit that I'm going to do is enzymes. So it has students take a look at how enzymes are used, which we talk about in the macromolecules chapter of biology. So I think it's really going to add to my curriculum and add to any activities that I've done previously. Just knowing that I feel like I'm still a relatively new biology teacher.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's good. I mean, in any kind of situations like this, I mean, I've had to be in a position where I am talking with teachers and district leaders on the other side of things, on the research side of things. So I think overall, one thing that makes partnerships like this really sustainable is if there is a win-win, is if there's a balance of benefit. So that if it does become a long-term relationship, that there is something that the district is getting out of it, so to speak, in return for the time and the resources. And it sounds like from what you're saying that's the case from what you can see so far.
And the researchers have also agreed to share with us any of a summary of their findings and recommendations that might be useful for us, not specific to our students necessarily, but in general based on what they find from their studies. So if it helps us continue to improve the education we're providing, terrific.
Now this Penn GSE thing, I've never heard. Just kidding. Amber, I don't know if you know, but I've taught there for 8 years, so I know the GSE well. But these are just general questions that I would ask of anyone that would be interested in working with our district, and I think that this is worth further discussion and decision at the full board level.
Okay, anyone else on the committee have any questions regarding this? Okay, I think we're ready to move on then Well, wait a minute. Are we going to put this through to the full board, Andrew?
Well, do we need to have a show of hands on this one?
Well, we can put it on the agenda and it can be discussed at the board meeting if you'd like.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I think the rest of the board, should have the opportunity to weigh in on my general policy about matters like this is that unless it's really not on, so to speak, that the full board should be able to deliberate on it. So.
I think if this is an item that can move forward to the consent agenda. Administratively, we're comfortable as part of board policy whenever somebody wants to do research that's pertaining to, our students. If there wasn't student involvement, administration can, approve a study that doesn't implicate directly with students. So as part of board policy, we can put this hearing the comments from this committee, moving forward to, consent agenda. And, Amber, thank you for not only all that you're doing in the classroom, but it's experiences like this, it's research like this that helps, improve our, our craft and our profession. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to 4.3, the technology update.
Thank you. And we have Dr. Hand and Ms. Glatzer and Mr. Augustine on here who will be providing us an update about technology in the age of COVID and what's been going on this fall.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. We wanted to be able to share some more insight. Technology has certainly been at the forefront of COVID, and it was certainly an interesting time for me to join the district right in summer, which is the busiest time for technology, but also in the midst of COVID. And here's everything, go make it work, and let's do a whole new school and let's make it happen at the start of the school year. So that was certainly fun. But I'm fortunate to have a really good team alongside of me to be able to share in this adventure administratively, but also with my counterparts who are joining me today as well. And we're really talking and wanted to share an update, and we're calling it Blended Learning 2.0. And we've been talking about blended learning for a number of years, but really this is our new iteration. A lot of lessons learned, things that we absolutely did not expect that would happen with COVID, and we wanted to share some of those with you today. And we're really going to talk about where we are in cyber and hybrid learning. We wanted to give you an overview and a little more insight into what we've been doing in instructional technology, but also with the infrastructure technology. So under 3 areas of preparation, enhancement, and support for cyber and hybrid learning. We wanted to dig a little bit into the financials and share some of that with you as well, because as we've been investing in this technology, we wanted to share with this committee some of the areas in which we've invested in order to make cyber and hybrid learning happen, but also share with you some of the new trajectories that COVID has taken us. There was a lot of acceleration that happened. We purchased things sooner than we thought we would, and we'll talk about that. But also there are new areas that we'd like to go because of this, and we wanted to share some of that with you today. And when we're looking at where we began in the spring with our emergency learning, and we went directly to online. And there were many lessons that we had learned from that and adaptations that we had made. And where we ended up was going to back to online and then into the hybrid mode. And what we've learned now is that we can become more flexible and more agile and more nimble. We provided some new opportunities, and Ms. Glatzer is going to share some of those with you that we've done not only with our students, but also with our teachers. But also we do have some future vision that we're beginning to establish here and trends that we're seeing coming from this. And you can probably start to glean some of those from the presentation that we're giving today, but also from the conversations that you're having, that you might start to ask, why isn't this possible all of the time? There's some really exciting things that are happening, and we really think that this will change the face of education. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Glatzer, who's going to talk a little bit more about the instructional side of technology and some of the areas of preparation, enhancement, and support.
So good evening, everyone. We, as you know, started with our summer professional development And along the way, we have tweaked and learned things just from the experience of hybrid. And we've been giving the teachers a lot of support along the way. So let me go into each of those things in a little bit of detail. So as far as Ready, Set, Go goes, we shared that with you in the summer, what we were working on with the teachers. And that's pretty much what we did on the left-hand side of the screen. We have archived that for the teachers so that if they want to return to anything or go to something they didn't get time to work on during the summer months, that's always there for them. And then along the way, as things progressed, when we realized we were going to be online from day one, we started to, let's go back one more. We decided to add some more robust materials and thinking on, so what does it mean to have students who you've never met before in some cases in front of you on Zoom, and how do you lay the groundwork for the year in that experience. So we did that as the year started. And then we thought there's things that students need along the way, so let's make those materials for them. And then we shifted into hybrid. So we brought our teachers back to thinking about hybrid and worked with them for a day to get them up and running and make sure they had what they needed to get started. So that's how we have been progressing. And come November 3rd, we will be meeting with the teachers again with some custom professional development for elementary, even splitting that by primary and intermediate, and then something for middle school and something a little bit different for high school as well, based on the things that we have been seeing throughout this initial part of the year. So let's talk about online learning. All I can tell you is I went to elementary school early on, and they were just rocking it. I don't know what to tell you. So I taught 3rd grade, 4th grade, and kindergarten. And that teacher who is leaping off the ground, it was so exciting. I get chills talking about it. It was so exciting to see what she was doing and like dancing and singing with the kids. And they just went for it. And it was really, really something to behold. And whether it be analog or digital, iPads, Chromebooks, Surface Goes, all of those ways that they approach things, the Radnor teachers just, really took the proverbial bull by the horns and did what they needed to do to make it successful. One of the things that, whether it be online or hybrid, that I think has really been very valuable for us is all of our devices have touch built into them. So, research says writing really helps you to think through things. And teachers have taken advantage of some of the tools that they have available to them to use those, a stylus or a finger or whatever it is that makes sense in both the online and the hybrid environment. One of those tools being OneNote, where I've been talking about OneNote for years, and all of a sudden it's clicking for teachers and they're going, oh, maybe I should be trying that. And in fact, I like it so much, when we go back to normal, I'm going to keep using it with my students. So those kinds of connections are beginning to be made. So let's talk about hybrid for a moment. In the hybrid environment, we realized that one size doesn't fit all. We have our A group, our B group, our C group. We have the kids that are cyber all the time. So we need to think about all of those groups. We need to think about the teachers and what are their needs when they have students in front of them and they have students on the other side of the screen as well. So we've done a lot of thinking about how do we engage the students? How do we provide them opportunities to interact with each other in the classroom, with each other if they're on Zoom, and together as well. And our goal is to keep all of the students engaged in whatever the learning is of the day. We had to think about things like our integrated teachers in a hybrid environment. So we have 2 teachers in the same classroom. What are the things they need to think about as far as the audio goes? How do they need to switch back and forth as they're talking so that the right person is on the screen when the right voice is the right voice is being heard? And you know, those kinds of they're technical things, but they have a big impact on how the teachers are interacting with each other. And we also have hybrid environments in the elementary school, not just secondary. So our kids are in the building half of the time, and the other half of the time they're doing something asynchronous at home, or they're working with a specialist in an environment where the specialists are working with them in a cyber classroom. So there's different needs that need to be addressed there as well. And then we have at the elementary school, we have a group of teachers like learning support teachers and teachers of the gifted who have kids who are in the cyber program, as well as kids who are in the classroom with them. So we have to address their needs as we are in this hybrid environment. So with all that being said, as I mentioned, they're starting to think and use all of these different tools that they've heard about along the way. And, you know, somebody will say to me, you know, Virginia, I really like using fill in the blank. I can understand why I would use this moving forward. So when we think about blended learning 2.0, I like to think about what does that mean for the future, and what are they going to take with them, and how are they going to embed these tools. Things that teachers are coming to us for support on are things like, you know, typically, Virginia, I do Shakespeare. How do I do Shakespeare when half of my kids are at home and half of my kids are here? Or they'll go to Fran or Abby or Libby and say, you know, we have dynamic dialogue, we have discussions. How do we do that? How do the kids at home hear the kids who are in the classroom? And what are the things that we need to address that? And how can we make sure that they're interacting? So if my name in the alphabet happens to be distant from my best friend who normally I'm in class with, how are we able to get those kids actually engaging with each other? So those are the kinds of conversations we have been having as far as hybrid learning goes. Now we move on, and I think our pilot, yes, we have the pilot teachers. I intentionally blurred their faces because they didn't know I was taking that that picture that day. But with the pilot teachers, so we have a group of teachers who are teaching from home, and we are meeting with them individually. We have group meetings with them, and some of the best conversations are being had. They are really, really analyzing everything they're doing. They're being very reflective. It's giving us an opportunity they're giving us an opportunity to visit their classes, whether it be physically going into the classroom that is being proctored, or whether it be joining them via Zoom and giving us an opportunity to hear what's going on, see what's going on, give them suggestions, or respond to a specific need that they are recognizing. And of course, addressing the technology needs that are unique to their particular situation. And now we're going to take a look at the tools that we're it seems like the tools are different every day. The picture in the middle, I guess it would be, is what we've been calling the spaghetti. And in addition to that, we have attached that spaghetti now to a docking station. And we've been playing with all different possibilities, because if you look at the screen on the right, we talked about how it needs to be personalized, not just to the student, but to the teacher. And quite a few teachers came to us early on and said, this was when we were all online, and they said, you know, Virginia, we really like being able to see all of our students, but when we go to share our screen, our kids go poof. We had this tiny little strip on the screen. How can we make it so that we can see our students? So with lots of behind the scenes moving things around, teachers who wanted a second monitor got a second monitor attached to their Surface. And they were able to keep their students on one screen while they were sharing their other screen. So that enabled them to always stay engaged with the kids, see the expressions on their faces, see if their heads were down like this, or see if they were going, oh yes, I get it, I understand. So that was a really beneficial tool that was added if they felt the need for it. And then we have this little blue guy who's sitting on the floor. We want to point him out. That's Hugh. It's also on the table, but it's sort of wedged between the monitor and the Surface. The Hugh is can be used in a couple of different ways. One is a document camera. So if a teacher of elementary kids or even a music teacher or an art teacher wants to be able to manipulate something and show the students what they are manipulating, they are able to do that. And in a hybrid environment, they can display it on the big screen as well as share it on their screen so that the students at home and the students in the classroom are able to see exactly the same thing, actually. Another way that teachers use it, they all have a Surface Pro and they're writing on their Surface Pro in many cases. The Hue camera can be stood straight up and looking at the teacher. So while they are writing on their Surface, they can use the U camera to get their face on the screen at the same time. And that has become very beneficial as well. So we have definitely tweaked the tools as we are going. And then finally is the support. Who are the people that are out there supporting the teachers? So we've pretty much divvied things up according to level. So Libby Kornman is working with the elementary teachers as well as all of the cyber teachers. And Abby Daniels is working at the middle school and Fran Meisner is working at the high school. But in addition to them, we have a team of instructional technology facilitators who we have had in the past as well. And we have some different people who have joined the team this year, one in every building. They are typically teachers, sometimes an instructional coach as well, who are providing on-site support sometimes in a crunch, sometimes with professional development. And we have been meeting with all of these folks on a regular basis. And Libby, Abby, and Fran are the ones who are working with me to design the professional development that will happen on November 3rd. And almost all of these people were part of the professional development team over the summer as well. So they are meeting with teachers one-on-one. They're holding drop-in sessions. This is the people on the left are holding drop-in sessions during the day for teachers to come in when they need some help. They're going into classes virtually and giving support that way, helping students figure things out along the way as far as the learning tools that they are using, and giving them live support in the classroom if needed. So we have quite the team that is working with these teachers. And we just thought we'd share with you a couple of the quotes that we have heard along the way. Recalibrating. Everybody is recalibrating on a regular basis and trying to find new opportunities. Thinking about teaching and learning in a new way. Saying, you know, this thing you told me about all the time, I now get it. I'm going to use it. And even our youngest kids are figuring out how to troubleshoot and problem solve as they are developing proficiency in these tools. So, and as we look at what those same kids were doing last year, or that same age group was doing this year, they've really come very far. So now I believe I am going to pass this on to either Chris or Scott.
I'll pass it to Chris.
Okay, thank you. So one other piece that we took a look at was our network infrastructure, and we really needed to step back, when we kind of went out in March or April, we needed to take a look at, what we could handle on our network, capacity wise, bandwidth wise, and we really didn't know what we were going to be up against. So one of the first things that we did was we took a look, and we had some audits done and some analysis done, particularly around our wireless. We had a company come out and perform a wireless audit and assessment. They walked the floor of our high school, and they gave us some recommendations that we were able to implement. And one of those recommendations was also that we upgrade some access points around the district. So the other analysis that we did was we took a look at financially, what we could do, what we wanted to do. So based on a lot of that, we were able to upgrade every wireless access point in every school building. That was really one of the biggest pieces. And moving forward, we took a look at some other projects and implementations that we either were planning to do or had on the books to do, one of which was our one-to-one implementation across the district. And I want to point out that while this was already slated, and we had already talked about our one-to-one initiative and our timeline for rolling this out, COVID really kind of expedited the rollout and the implementation of this. So we were able to make some purchases in advance, and it was really helpful to get the devices in the kids' hands. So what we were able to do, we put iPads in all the hands of K to 2, Chromebooks from 3 to 8, and Surface Go's from 9 to 12. We were also able to get all of our K to 8 teachers upgraded with Surface Pros as well. We took a look at our wireless infrastructure. Like I said, we took a look, and that assessment, when they looked at our wireless, they looked at the wireless as well as any kind of pieces that might be touching the wireless, so our switching infrastructure, some servers that were related as well. And we also took a look internally. We looked at monitoring and what we could do to be a little bit more proactive in our infrastructure and just monitoring it. Another piece we took a look at, we looked at our student account security. We got some feedback from some parents, and we made some changes to the student accounts just to add a little bit additional layers of security around particularly their usernames and passwords. And we also added a piece for it's called remote software access here. What we ended up doing, we took a look at some different solutions, and we ended up settling on what's called Amazon AppStream. And what that does is it allows students and teachers to run some really heavy workloads and really heavy applications remotely on remote servers, but then stream that down to their laptops, their Surface Go's, or even a Chromebook. So it saves on costs, it saves on hardware costs, and it also allows for connectivity from home too. So if the student wants to jump on at 9 o'clock and launch AutoCAD and work on some Project Lead the Way work, they're able to do so. So that's really added some benefit to our software stack. We also looked at our support, and we knew, kind of going into the remote and the hybrid, support was going to be very important. We added a support hotline, which is manned every day by individuals. We have our text handling overflow of that in case we get a flood of calls. We added online support forms for parents and students to fill out tickets for those that might be remote. We added parent tutorials on our website, and we also added a PTO podcast, which I think Scott is going to talk about briefly.
I only need 10 seconds and I'll let you continue. The PTO podcast was an idea that had stemmed out of working with the Res PTO and then district-wide PTO, that we were actually looking at some family supports initially, like some technical support off hours, like if I'm struggling like at 6 o'clock at night and I just need to log in. But it quickly developed into an idea of parents sharing ideas with parents. And so we've begun recording podcasts with parents and outside experts, and we're calling it the virtual learning download. Basically the idea of sharing ideas about raising a digital generation that all households have questions, and how are different households handling different things like screen time and making sure my internet's set up correctly, and how do I manage communications in my digital life, and how do I help my kids build online resiliency and independence. We've already recorded 3 episodes with another episode tomorrow. So within the next couple of weeks, we'll begin releasing those and sharing those out with families.
So, and I think the next slide, so I talked a little bit about monitoring. So this is one of the things, this is a work in progress, but what we kind of wanted to get a little bit proactive internally and have at a glance an idea of what was happening on our network and even beyond our network. You know, we're so dependent and reliant on external services. I mean, we're using Zoom right now. So we kind of wanted to get a better idea and a better picture of what was actually happening both on and off our network. So this is just I think a snapshot from, I don't even know when this is, but you can see, you know, we're taking a look at our bandwidth. We're making sure that we're not exceeding any constraints of our network. We are monitoring, like I said, there's third-party services. We do get alerts, like if Zoom were to have a problem, Clever, Schoology, we are monitoring these on a daily basis. And based on, you know, what we're monitoring and what we're seeing lately, I'm happy to say our network is healthy. I mean, we're not stressing anything. Our infrastructure is well within the capabilities of what we're pushing through it right now in terms of bandwidth and network congestion. If I took a look over the last, I think it was 14 days, we're averaging about 500 megabits of throughput out of really 4,000. So we're really only pushing about 12.5% of our total maximum throughput. So right now, the way things stand, we're looking pretty good right now.
So thank you, Chris, and to the work that Virginia and Chris have both done on both ends to get things ready and get things prepared. To close out, I wanted to share, and we talked about financials, but just going back to visiting the technology study, I mean, that was the impetus for a lot of these things and the goals that had come out of there. And I wanted to at least put those on the screen, and looking back at them, we're looking through a COVID lens now. Some of these goals might need revisited, and some of these goals we quickly check them off the list. We've accomplished them pretty quickly. So we'll be reconvening and taking a look at some of these goals in here. When we look at some of them, such as the first one, students using technology where appropriate to engage in a wide variety of rigorous experiences. I think they've been doing that through the spring and through the fall. What does that actually look like now? We developed all of these goals in a pre-pandemic world. So we said, what are the tools, resources, and skills that teachers and students need with this technology? Well, it's completely different now. Like, how do you interact online? That was something we didn't have defined as a goal. When we look at RTSD will complete a comprehensive audit of the wireless. Check. And that was actually just for the high school was that goal. We actually did that for the entire district. So we actually went through a lot of these, and I think we'll probably want to look at these again, but looking again at these through a different lens. So we'll be reapproaching those. But some of the things that did come out of that study as well was looking at moving forward with that one-to-one. So this was the proposal that was shared as far as the device cycles and distributions from the original technology study and one-to-one proposal, where we were going to begin in this school year, in the 2021 school year, where we were going to phase out. Last year was the last group that had iPads at the high school. That was the seniors. And we were still looking at phasing in some of the 2-to-1 at the elementary levels, but then bringing in one-to-one across the next multiple years. What we actually see inside of those, so again, we were supposed to start this school year, the averages for all of those across those 8 years average about $556,000. So there were some years that went up, some years that went down based on the ordering. But since we were able to purchase all of those devices in the spring for K-2 with iPads, 3-5 with Chromebooks, and getting that elementary ready, our middle school already had the Chromebooks, sending those home, and then bringing the last set of the Surface Go's with this new class, we were actually able to adjust some of those. So the adjusted plan here's what the adjusted plan looks like. You'll notice the adjusted plan is actually more consistent and more level across the years. So we'll have students at grades K, 3, 6, and 9 all receiving new devices. And that will be their device for as long as they have that device. So for 3 years with the iPad, K to 2, it's your Chromebook from 3 to 5. As long as you're in middle school, that's your device. So take good care of it. And the same thing in high school. And we've seen really good results from that within high school, that students take much better care of their device, have much more ownership, especially if it's going to be their same device across years. But with these level costs, allows us to have more predictable costs in our finances as well. So we don't have large years where we have huge spikes in our technology purchasing. By making this more level, you'll see some of the initial costs coming in this year being a little bit higher, and then having consistent costs at about $521,000 per year. So if you ignored the first year, it's $521,000 per year. Including that on this chart, you're looking at about $537,000 average for 8 years. So it actually takes our average down ever so slightly, about $18,000. But the benefit again of this is having predictable costs when we're doing budgeting and future forecasting. So what did we spend COVID money on? How did we spend our money so far between the spring and between the fall? And I know that's a big question. We had to, again, I opened with technology, and here you go. It's all dependent on technology. How did we spend some of this money? So I do have stars next to some of these items, and you'll notice that it does say indicates grant funding. We'll talk about that in 2 minutes. But we did make that purchase, as Mr. Augustine shared, about K-5 devices and the K-8 teacher laptop. So there are the overall costs there. He mentioned we had done the wireless upgrades, where we have new wireless access in each of our 5 school buildings. Ms. Glatzer mentioned the web and document cameras, the Hue cameras, or they're affectionately referred to as Huey sometimes. We did purchase those cameras, and you can see the cost for that. Very large area is just under accessories, and as she shared in some of the pictures, what we're, again, affectionately calling spaghetti. We have a lot of cables and adapters and things that we need and that are hanging off of these surfaces. But a large purchase that we had recently made are the docks. So they make surface docks, so we can begin to reduce some of that clutter in there. But also we're learning speakers, microphones, things to constantly enhance and make better. That is a fairly large area. But also in there are device cases, and not just the rubber cases that go on, but also carrying cases. That was something new that we had learned, that if these students will be transporting these devices, we wanted them to have a safe and secure way, especially if they're carrying a power supply with that and it gets a little awkward. All of those cases for K-8 have been back ordered since May. We still haven't received those, but that was a new purchase. So our 2 largest purchases in there were the cases and the surface docks, but there are a lot of extras in there. Zoom licensing comes in there. So we've added cloud storage. We've added more capacity that more people can join at once and have unlimited time on there. Certainly that's a cost, but also we have hotspots in there. So for our families who have limited access or financial resources to home access, to make sure that we have that equity of access at home. So while that number, 1.1 million, might look large, remember, a lot of those are START and grant funded. So here's what it looks like if we move from that grant funding to what we actually spend, sort of our outer pocket costs. We're only looking at thus far that's spending about $152,000. So those 3 areas that are highlighted actually came from state and county-wide grants. So it came from CARES grants and ESSR grants. So elementary, secondary relief, school emergency relief, I think is the name of it. CARES Act actually came out of federal funding, or federal initiative, CARES Act, but then moved into state as well. So we have state and county that paid for all of those. But remember, as a board, we also made a commitment in the spring to reducing the technology budget over the next 2 years. So this year and the next school year at $270,000 in order to make those initial costs. So we've already pre-planned for that, but also we've been able to have budgetary support from outside funding sources, such as these 3 grant areas. We've also recently approached RAF, the Radnor Education Foundation, about having some partial support in some of those supplies, and specifically those surface docks. We were hoping to have some offset of costs because of all of the innovative instruction that's actually happening right now that we're seeing in our hybrid and hybrid learning, but also knowing that we have some future potential. So we were able to recuperate $950,000. And there is still another grant out there, a countywide CARES grant that is out there for which we'll be applying. And we should hear back from that in the next couple of weeks. So we have all of these things basically in line with budget and have been able to do this fairly well and in a way that is very sustainable. So last slide, and then if you have some questions, where do we go from here? What does the future look like? So certainly we're going to continue ongoing professional development inside of blended learning. Our teachers we said, let's just get started. Let's just help you get what you need. Let's get Zoom, let's get Schoology, and let's just do this really well. And as they've begun experimenting and enriching their content, we're really beginning to focus on engagement and interaction. And Virginia had mentioned some of those areas. Well, how do I interact between this group and that group? And we're deepening that conversation on engagement and interaction now. We also have a wonderful group of a little over 20 K-5 teachers who are part of a STEM endorsement cohort. So from the last PA Smart targeted grant that Radnor Township School District had received for $35,000. We have a group going through the STEM endorsement program from the Chester County Intermediate Unit, and we're hoping to lean into them and help craft some of the programming that they're going through that they can begin to help us create that K-5 STEM and computer science vision. What does STEM and STEAM learning and computer science and computational thinking look like for the Radnor Township School District? Something really exciting that's coming up. But also online learning flexibility. These phases that we have right now of phase 3 being all online and phase 2 being our hybrid model and phase 1 being in school, I really think phases are going to turn into options, that we are going to have some of these options post-COVID for our students. We're going to see hybrid learning continue and online and cyber learning continue. And what does that look like for the school district? What does that look like at the elementary and secondary level? And how do we make those opportunities available for our kids? But also continuing to build out our team. We know we're looking at new applications that we're receiving and how do we handle these applications and new software programs that teachers are requesting. And we're really excited and want to say yes to all of them, but make sure that we can support them really well. And also being able to support our staff, our students, but also our parents and community in a sustainable way through online and on-demand learning modules. Our teachers know Schoology really well. Our kids have learned Schoology through their teachers, and we've heard from our parents that they want to learn Schoology too and get into support. So how can we provide and continue to provide more of these supports for them? So those are multiple areas on which we'll be focusing. So I appreciate the time. I know that was hopefully not too much, hopefully not more than you wanted. The 3 of us are here for questions if you have any, or we could address those at a future time.
So we are at almost 6:30.
I did that on purpose.
We have a really important agenda item still yet to come. Not that it isn't all important, but I think it's really critical to get to the teacher shortage piece as well. So I'm hoping for a little bit of extra time for the committee, for this committee meeting to carry on, because I'm sure that people have questions about the technology and what's happening with the virtual learning. So how do we want to proceed, folks?
Can I make a suggestion, Lydia? I'll just,
Please.
and I think, sorry, Dan, I didn't mean to jump in on you. I was just thinking, we can move the substitute presentation to next week's board meeting. And actually, we were going to go over some of that information that's going to be shared tonight in curriculum. We were going to go over that again next week at the board meeting. So I think that fits very nicely. And the assessment calendar can be handled. That item is not pressing, and we can certainly share that with board. And since we do have a facilities meeting that's starting at 6:30. Maybe we could schedule another time to circle back and just have follow-up discussion on technology. because Dr. Hand and Sean, Dan, and Virginia, and Chris, and the team, Jim. I mean, it's really, I got excited listening to it, and I've seen that information now, and seeing it again. I appreciate all of the work and energy, and we don't know. One of the things we've talked about administratively a little bit is, in the midst of a crisis and everything that we're doing to keep school open, we're trying to take some time to look at what are the things that we're learning that are going to take education in a very positive direction in the future, and what things do we know we that are great about this situation, that are that we're learning, what are the challenges, what doesn't work well, we're learning. So I think this is something we could come back and have further discussion with the board. I know that there are no comments for tonight's meeting, so there's no public comment. So, I mean, Dan and Sean, if you're good, are you good with putting those two items and moving that? And if the board is comfortable with that, does that work for you guys?
Yes, I think we could move the assessment calendar to next month's meeting, and then I would be in support of your recommendation, Mr. Bather, to move the substitute presentation to Tuesday's business meeting. I think that the public and the board would be interested to hear that. So I think that sounds like a great idea.
Okay, and I may be very biased, but I think this is the critical work of the board at the moment. So I want the committee members to have an opportunity, to strike while the iron's hot with this particular topic. Is there anything anyone would like to mention at this moment? And then we can bring this back. What do we want to do? Schedule another meeting? I think that it warrants it, honestly, to discuss everything that's going on with virtual learning. How does the committee feel?
I think that's a good idea.
All right, so shall we do that? Does anyone want to say anything at this moment, or are we good with scheduling? If our presenters will come back and humor us, we'd like to keep this conversation going, and let's schedule a second meeting later in the month.
We know where to find them. We know where to find them to schedule them for another meeting, so we could definitely do that.
I can Zoom you at any time, huh?
Yeah, it's a lot easier now.
All right, that's a great plan. And I really, really want to get to that teacher shortage piece. So I'm pleased that we'll, really be able to present it to a wider audience next week. So that's cool. All right. So we're going to then have to, I guess, end our meeting short. We didn't get through everything. Incredibly useful meeting. Does anyone have any new business? Seeing none, I already know that there are no public comments, so we will reconvene to continue the discussion of technology, and then we will talk about the teacher shortage next week. So our next official meeting is going to be the 3rd Tuesday of November. So with that said, the meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.